Objections are just part of the sales process, right? But does it really need to be? And in this video, I'm explaining that possibly you don't even need to go through objection handling, but if you do, how to handle that with compassion. So make sure you check out this video on how to avoid the objections in the first place, and if you do, how to overcome them with compassion. Hey, it's Tom Jacobs here. Thanks for stopping by the channel. I love dropping sales advice for those heart-centered salespeople so that you can help more people and grow your practice. Check out this video on objection handling. I'm sure you'll love it. What the heck is an objection anyway? So many people come to my trainings and they want to work on objection handling scripts and ways to overcome all of this questions that they get during the sales conversation that ultimately don't lead to a sale. And in my opinion, an objection is really a clarification on something that's confusing in that prospect's mind. But you should never get an objection, in my opinion. Objections aren't about trickery or finding those clever scripts and things like that, although there's time and place for those. It's really about understanding what the potential objections are and making sure that those are addressed during the sales conversation so that at the end you don't have to even handle them. Even if you've prepared your sales presentation to handle any objections before they come up, inevitably you're going to have objections at some point in your sales career. So how do you handle them with compassion? The old school way of handling objections is kind of beating that prospect over the head with, oh, you're wrong about that. So handling objections with compassion is really just a three-step process. You need to first acknowledge that you heard them. Second is to question the objections to understand what might be the underlying cause of that. And the third part is overcoming that objection and helping that prospect understand what their concern is and how your program or service is going to address that concern. And that's how you handle objections with compassion. One of my least favorite objections is, I got to think about it. And it's probably the most common one that most people get. And when I think back to the conversation that I was having with a prospect before they said, oh, I got to think about it, there was a couple things that went wrong with it. Number one, I gave too much information to them, and so they were overwhelmed with information, and they truly needed to digest all of that information. So the first thing is just make sure everything in your sales conversation is simple and explained properly so that the prospect doesn't really have any questions and it's not super complicated that they have to go and think about it. The second reason that you would get that objection is as a smokescreen. They're not wanting to be rude to you and say no. And that's just a couple ways of handling that very common objection of, I got to think about it. New salespeople tend to get really nervous when there are objections. And really, objections are just questions, clarifying questions that the prospect was unclear about and needs some clarification before they can make a decision to have all the information necessary to make the decision. And it is your job as the salesperson to make sure you are addressing any concerns or potential questions that that prospect might have during the sales conversation. So at the end, they do truly have all the information that they need. If you're getting a lot of these objections at the end of your sales conversation, you need to really go back into your scripting to make sure that you are addressing those objections before they even come up. When you're handling objections with compassion, it also means that you're not getting defensive that these prospects actually have questions about what it is that you do and how it can ultimately help them. Of course, as I've been saying all along, you really need to make sure that those potential objections and questions are handled early on in the conversation so that at the end, it's really about the logistics of getting them signed up and not handling objections. And when you have compassion, that prospect is going to feel it and want to do business with you. When I'm working with my clients on the sales conversation and objection handling and all that, a lot of times they report to me when they're on the call, they'll get an objection and then they just kind of stumble over and they're like, oh, I don't know what to say. And then something really odd comes out of their mouth and they're not quite sure where that came from. One way of building that objection handling muscle is making sure that you are practicing those objection handling scripts and the way to come back at an objection with compassion. You need to be doing that on a weekly basis so that when somebody does come up with one of these oddball objections, you can go through the process easily and not get offended that somebody actually has a question about your product or service and how it relates to them. Just like going to the gym, you need to be doing that on a daily basis to build those muscles. Build those objection handling muscles on a daily basis too. Look, for a lot of people, investing in a health and wellness program can be a scary thing. And there will be objections in their own head about why they can't purchase your program or go through your program or even be successful if they did actually purchase your program. So it is imperative that you have compassion and empathy when going through the objection process. And having empathy really means being able to get into that prospect's shoes and understanding where they're coming from. And once you do that, now you can understand what the underlying concerns are. And then when you address those objections with compassion, that prospect is going to feel that compassion, feel that empathy, and understand that you are looking out for their own best interest, and ultimately they're going to buy your program. I've put together some objection handling scripts that I've come across over the years of being in sales, and I'd love to give those to you. There's a link down below. Just grab that PDF and get better at handling objections.